Thank you for joining WCAPS as we provide another insightful information session into student loan forgiveness space. I'm Adriana F. Mond, and I am joined by Alpha Taylor from the National Consumer Law Center as we commemorate the anniversary of the hearings of student loan forgiveness cases from February 2023 that led to the very public SCOTUS decision in June. Alpha, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Adriana. Appreciate it.
This talk on the anniversary of the hearings will not be focused on things that have already happened, but more so on how to navigate the current environment that we're in regarding student loans, forgiveness, payment plans, as well as how Alpha found his way into advocating in this space. In fact, let's start there. Alpha, can you tell us a bit about your background concerning this topic? What about student loan forgiveness brought you into this area of advocacy?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at my legal career, at heart, you'll see a public interest lawyer, right? I started before even getting into the student loan space. I was a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati, where I represented low-income tenants and homeowners in foreclosure cases. And about 10% of my work portfolio at that time involved like student loan work. So it wasn't a big part of my practice, but it was something, that I was doing. And I think through my work, I was actually able to see firsthand, how student debt, was burdening borrowers, especially low-income borrowers. Most of my clients were elderly, low-income people of color who at that time were facing, garnishment and offset of their social security payments. And you have cases where these are borrowers who are already in default. So they face offset of their tax refund, because that's part of the consequence of, defaulting on a federal student loan debt, is that the government have these extraordinary collection power that, they can take your tax refund before you even get it. Thankfully, that's not happening right now for various reasons that I'm going to discuss. But that was, before when I started getting into the space. And then, luckily, I've been, aware about the National Consumer Law Center, because, we do a lot of advocacy in this space, but we also do a lot of training for attorneys who represent low-income people. So it was, the perfect fit for me to continue, the work that I've been doing. I see myself more of a of a lawyer fighting poverty, because I mean, student debt, housing debt, or whether it's eviction, all of these things are instrumentality of poverty that keeps people down. So the more that we can do to help people, reduce or eliminate that burden, I think the better I am, and also the better I feel about, being an attorney to be able to use my education and my training in that way.
That is one so very inspirational, but also leads directly into our second question, which is how did the decision and opinion by the Supreme Court feed into existing frustrations around student loan forgiveness? And how did it showcase the disproportionate impact of debt on different groups?
Yeah, I think student debt is it's not just a physical debt that impact borrowers financially, right? It also has an emotional toll, right? It is stressful, like having that debt,
Mhm.
having to sit at the table and realize like, oh man, like I have to pay X amount next month, or if I'm in default, that that tax refund that I'm looking forward to getting is going to, be taken away. So it is stressful, and so, but to kind of understand the gravity of the frustration, we really have to develop an understanding of who student loan borrowers are and
Yeah.
how student debt, is impacting their lives. Over 40 million Americans owe roughly about $1.6 trillion in federal student loan debt. That's big. That's a big number, right? That's a lot of zeros towards the end of that, right?
Yeah.
And and I mean, to put it in perspective, student loan debt is the second source of consumer debt next to mortgages, right? So it's like you have more student debt than you have in credit cards debt, right? So it's a debt that, that burdens, burdens borrowers, but studies have shown that, the impact of student debt, is not felt evenly across the board.
Yeah.
Black borrowers, Black women tend to carry a much heavier load, when it comes to the student debt burden. And part of the reason is because, I mean, just starting off, I mean, if you look at the history, structural racism, Jim Crow segregation, where Black people were not given the opportunity to generate wealth, right? Historically, right? So most Black parents, do not or did not have the funds available to kind of help their children finance their American dream by obtaining an education.
Yeah.
So when federal student loan seems, reasonable, affordable, available at that, in most cases, I mean, you signed it when you were just out of high school. So, most Black borrowers end up taking more in federal student loan debt because we actually need more because sometimes the financial aid award is not enough, right? It's like in some
Reach.
cases, we have to get in more debt. And I think it's also interesting because this is an intergenerational debt, right? Because
Hmm.
in cases where you go to school, we know, I mean, I was in college, I was on financial aid, and I know sometimes I know what it costs to live, and I get that award letter that, that's like 10 grams short or 5K short. Like, hey, like you need to kind of, to make it up. And in some
Yeah.
cases, parents who are already in poverty getting to student debt through Parent Plus loan to kind of finance, their children's education. So as a result, the impact of student debt is felt heavily on low income people, and people of color. So it's really, it's an intergenerational thing. And but it's based on a promise, right? That hey, if you go to school, right, the way to success is like go to school, get your education, and when you do get your education, you get the job, and then you will at least be able to fund your American dream, right? So
Yeah.
student loans, the way we saw it, and I think most borrowers we were like, hey, this is could be a means to, at least a better life. But the reverse ended up being true for most people, where it didn't lead to that better life, but it instead led to more debt, right? Because in some cases, you have borrowers who, went there to a predatory for-profit schools, where there were many of those schools around, thankfully some are going away, that targeted, low-income people and people of color to obtain degrees that were not worth the papers they were printed on, right?
Yeah.
So as a result, some of these folks graduated with a degree but couldn't find a job. In some cases, some didn't even get a chance to graduate because the schools that they were attending closed and they are stuck with the debt. And then even in the case of Black women, right, tend to have, a higher level education like master degrees and things like that. But that is a result of the system because in most cases, having a bachelor,
Not
it's not
enough anymore.
right because now it's like, everybody can get a bachelor, right? So it's like when you want to,
Hmm.
like the goalposts keep moving, right? And for you to get there, you find yourself, in a long-term relationship with student debt. And
Yeah.
by the time you get the degree and you get the job and you realize that, man, now like I'm in debt and I can't finance the American dream that I was hoping for. I can't, afford to get a mortgage. I can't afford to invest in a small business or invest in a retirement. Now that's when, the weight of the debt gets heavy, right? Because even if you become successful as a, African American or person of color, that's just not it because now you're saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt that
Yeah.
is, well, you could pay within 20 to 25 years. And for most people, it just ended up being a bad deal. So when President Biden announced, that, this debt relief plan of, I mean, for giving $10,000 for borrowers at a certain income level, and then an additional $10,000 for, borrowers who receive a Pell Grant. I mean, that was great news. I mean, it wasn't going to wipe out student debt entirely. Definitely wouldn't wipe out a $1.6 trillion.
I
Far from
mean,
it, right?
I
Yeah.
was happy though, because I was going to drop from 70 to like 50-ish, and that's a big number.
Exactly. So that was the hope, right? Because some people were like, yeah, I mean, dropping that means like lower monthly payment. For some people who, been in repayment for a long time, some of them only owe $10,000, $12,000, some just owe 20. Like, hey, this is it. This goes through, I get my loan, this burden can finally get off my shoulder. And then I can, then move forward, to like, chase the American dream and actually,
Yeah.
try to build some generational wealth. So that hope was built up to that moment. So when the court came down with the decision in Biden v. Nebraska, basically like striking down the plan, I mean, borrowers were frustrated. Advocates were frustrated, right? This is
Yeah.
something that's like, I mean, promises not realizing, but as Black people in America, we know, like, there've been many promises that have been broken in the past. And I think most people felt like, well, what do we have to do, to get the relief that we need and the relief that we're entitled to? So borrowers were frustrated, and it added to the frustration, and borrowers were justifiably frustrated, but that is not the end of the road. There is light of the tunnel. And, there are relief programs, that are available to help borrowers, kind of navigate, the federal student loan system to reduce the
Yeah.
student burden. I can tell you now that the landscape is much better, than it was like 2, 3 years ago. There are a lot of relief options that were in there.
Yeah.
So
Well,
cancellation didn't happen, but there were other changes and relief programs that, that's been implemented, and there are more in the works that could really help reduce that burden of student debt on borrowers.
and I think that's really what people want to know. Like, what are the next best steps that borrowers can take to get assistance for student loan relief? What resources exist for me to access to pay off my loans to get forgiveness? Is the SAVE program worth it? How do I access the PSLF? Like, what does it look? What can I do? Because I'm drowning.
Yeah, and I think it's a reasonable question to ask, right? It's like, like I need we need a lifeline, right? We didn't get cancellation. Like, what can you do, whether it's President Biden or, because they're out of the court's hands, and what can you do to kind of release that burden? And I think the Biden administration has taken steps, right, to kind of address some of these challenges. So cancellation didn't happen, but that didn't end the struggle. It didn't, kill the fire that was burning. So there has been, there are numerous reform. I mean, we reformed, the PSLF, forgiveness process through, a rulemaking process that actually going to make it a lot easier for public service, workers, those who are in public service to kind of get, loan forgiveness within that 10-year period. And also there were reform to the total and permanent disability program to make it easier that disabled borrowers who were burdened with student debt that they couldn't pay for because they couldn't work because they were disabled can now easily kind of discharge that debt. And additionally, like current relief programs include, I mean, we all know about the PSLF waiver that came through that really helped a lot of public service workers who use the PSLF waiver to kind of reach loan forgiveness faster.
Yeah.
So the administration also has currently what's going on is the IDR account adjustment, right? So that is related to the IDR plan, but it came about historically because there has been problem with the repayment plans, right? You
Yeah.
have people who, were in repayment, were making the payments, and were looking forward to having the loans discharged within 20 to 25 years. And that year, the time came, but the loan was still there. And that
Yeah.
was because of problems within the system, servicing errors. You have problem with, miscalculation of payments, inaccurate payment history and things like that. So
So what you're saying is the math wasn't mathing.
the math wasn't mathing for most people. It's like, well, you said 20 years, I'm at 20 years. You said 25, I'm at, but like I look at my account, there's still a balance, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason because some of those time that those folks spend in repayments, right? And they thought that, hey, I'm making the payments, it's going to count. Some of those times didn't count because there was a servicing error or, we had an issue of forbearance staring, but also because, that payment history was kind of missing. There
Yeah.
were inaccurate payment history. Servicers were using different software to calculate how, where you were at. So it's just confusing. And those are not problems that were created by borrowers. So most of the time people think about the student loan system like, oh, these borrowers just, they just want to hand up. Like, it's not just about helping borrowers. It's about fixing a system that is like broken, that
Yeah.
even if you do the right thing, you don't get the right result. Like even if you look at the math and you say it just wasn't working.
No.
So the Biden administration is currently doing a one-time IDR account adjustment, right? To kind of, account for those instances in the past where borrowers, should have gotten credit towards loan forgiveness, but it didn't happen. So I mean, it's a process that's going as an automatic process where there just is a one-time process to give borrower credits, for
Yeah.
payments made in the past, payments that would not, otherwise count, are going to count under the IDR account adjustment. And then, but there are some limitations when it comes to some loans. So there are certain loans that, are excluded from the account adjustment or will be excluded unless the borrower takes certain steps, right?
Wait, do
For
you mean government loans that are excluded?
Government, we call them like commercial fair loans, loans that are not held by the Department of Education. So the Department of Education does now hold, like, there were, for example, commercial fair loans. Those were old loans that were made back in the day by, like, banks and,
Yeah,
things like that, not directly from the department, but like the department is considered of like, insure them,
yeah,
but
okay,
they are not owned by the department, right? So all these loan, commercial federal family education loan program, which is no longer in existence, but there are still loan that remains from those programs. If the loan is still held, by an entity other than, the Department of Education, the borrower have to consolidate that fair loan into a
yeah,
loan to kind of get credit for those times, where payments were made that wouldn't have counted. This also includes Perkins loans, right? Perkins loan has loans that are given to the borrowers by the schools, and so most of these loans are also held by the schools. So having the opportunity to, like, consolidate, those loans, and then, looking forward to getting the benefit of that kind of adjustment so that you can have, the maximum time available counted towards forgiveness. And the deadline has been extended if you want to consolidate loans that are not held by the department, which include commercial fair loans, Perkins loans, and HEAL loans, health education assistant loans, but I think the Department of Health has a separate loan program.
yeah,
But April 30th, 2024 is kind of like the deadline to do that consolidation so that you can get, you know, credit counted. And
yeah,
why this is important, right? Because if you look at IDR and even PSLF, right, it's based on how many, PSLF is 120 payments.
yep.
So it's like the more payments you can get counted, there's an opportunity to get those payments
Which
counted.
sounds great, but also what you're saying is sometimes these payments don't get counted. So it's like even if I made 120 $0 payments because I'd be broke,
So
if
okay,
I'm
but
counting them,
that's how it was before, right? And we hope
yeah,
it's gonna get better, but that's what that kind of adjustment is about. It's about kind of, you know, I want to say restorative, but like just acknowledging, but more than just acknowledging, but saying, hey, there were problems in the past, and we know that a substantial group of borrower would have probably been at forgiveness or would have had more payment counted to our forgiveness, but because of factors outside of their control, it didn't
yeah,
happen. So we're going to do this one time, a kind of adjustment to kind of relax some of the rules to make sure that all payments, I think from like July 1994, is going to count, right? Payments is,
okay,
in forbearance and things like that. Ordinarily, those payments will not count, but like under their kind of adjustment, the department is going to do it. So most people are going to see a little extra bump in the amount of payments that they have that could be counted to or forgiven. And people are already seeing it, right? So some,
yeah,
getting that loan discharge because there were folks that were just kind of closer to the discharge point. All they needed probably was, 10, 15, or 5 payments to kind of get the loan discharged. And that process is being done now. And there are borrowers who have gotten forgiveness as a result. So that's, that's really, really is great. And then we also have the Fresh Start program. The Fresh Start program is, an initiative by the department to help borrowers who are in default. So
okay,
going into the pandemic, there are over, I think, like 9 million borrowers who were in default of federal student loans, right? These are borrowers who experienced some sort of a hardship, couldn't make the payments, and
yeah,
the result, were either in offset or wage garnishment, things like that. So even though that has been paused because of the pandemic and also because of the on-ramp to repayment program, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. So Fresh Start allows borrowers who, were in default before the payment pause to kind of get out of default just by a phone call. All right.
okay,
Yeah, so the way it works is that you can call the department default resolution group, and if you have a loan that is held by the department, and say, hey, I want my loans removed from default, and they will do that they will do that upon your request. And then you can also provide information on, access regarding your income so that you
mhm,
can get enrolled into an IDR plan. Because if you're in default, it's kind of hard to get out of default, right?
yeah.
There's only limited options to get out of it. And this program makes it, a little bit easier, and it's a one-time program, it's time limited. So if you're in default, like, this is your opportunity to, like, make
Do it
that,
now.
do it now, get out
Make
of
it.
default, and then you can have access to income-driven repayment plan, like the SAFE program you talked about. Because if you're in default, you don't have access to, like, affordable income-driven repayment plans. So what we saw that folks who were in default were actually paying uh, a lot more, right? Being garnished or being offset a lot more than what they would have paid if they were enroll in an IDR plan. Most borrowers sometimes end up with a $0. Not most borrowers, but like many borrowers with low income will end up with a $0 payment, basically like $0 on an IDR plan. So it's like this is the era where the math will work, right? So get
Yes.
out for a use fresh start. And if your loans are not held by the Department of Education, it's held by the guarantee agency. Guarantee agency at the private agency that hold like commercial FFEL loans, loans that were insured by the department but are not held by the department. You can also call the guarantee agency to get the loan removed from default through Fresh Start, and then get into an affordable IDR plan like SAFE. But this is limited, is a 1-year program that's going to expire, I think, at the end of September. So if you want to do it now, take advantage, get out of default, and then get into repayment. And then earlier you mentioned about SAVE, right? SAVE, the Saving on Valuable Education Plan, SAVE, is the most affordable repayment plan that is out there right now that is going to really, allow for reduced payments for most borrowers. Now, there are some cases where it may not work for some borrowers depending on factors, but for most borrowers, SAVE, could be the safer bet in trying to get, your payments reduced. Because before SAVE, your student loan payments were based on 10% of your adjusted gross income, compared above 150% of the federal poverty guideline, right?
Oh,
SAVE does is like increase that to 225% of the federal poverty guideline, which means more of your income will be exempted. That means like, income up to 225% of the federal poverty guideline is not going to be considered when the government is trying to kind of sort of calculate how much your monthly student loan payment is. So that means that, SAVE can really significantly reduce how much, you pay monthly compared
mhm.
to other IDR plans. To put that in perspective, like a family, let's say a single borrower in 2024,
I
may-
got you. My
yeah.
mom sent me a bill and they said, you owe us $738. And I said, the devil is a lie. I'm applying for SAVE.
Yeah, and
And it dropped
it,
from
it brought it down. So it's like
738 to zero
to
because
zero.
the way life works out. So it was amazing. So yes, SAVE
So
program.
that's something. It's
If
like,
you haven't signed up, sign up.
and
It
I
can't hurt.
mean, like you said, if you're single, $33,000, whatever it goes, that a family of four making $70,000, went up with a zero payment. Family of five making $82,000, can end up with a $0 payment.
Every little bit helps.
Yeah. And even if you don't end up with a $0 payment, because like you could also end up with paying a lot less per month, if you enrolled in SAVE. And additionally, I think sometimes in July, uh, for borrowers with undergraduate loan, it's going to go from 10% of your income to 5%, right? So again, further reducing down the monthly payment. And I think recently the department announced that it was going to accelerate, cancellation, for certain SAVE borrowers who borrowed $12,000 or less. This was supposed to happen in July, but it has been accelerated to happen now. And I think like last week on February 21st, the department actually discharged the loan of 153,000 borrowers
Wow.
automatically, right? Who were enrolled in SAVE and had already made 10 qualifying payments. So as a result, they had their loan like discharged automatically. And additionally, to put things in perspective, I think about 4.3 million borrowers in SAVE have a $0 monthly payment. So it could be you. The math could work for you. You just have to, apply again. There are some situations where the math won't math, but you look at a
Yeah.
number and you kind of make that decision for yourself. So to kind of sum this up, it's like, yes, cancellation didn't happen, as we thought and wanted to, back, in Biden, because of Biden v. Nebraska. But loans are being canceled, right,
Yeah.
as a result of existing programs, right, that, like that is providing relief to borrowers. And 153,000 borrowers, that's a lot. And there are, and that doesn't even take into account of borrowers who are getting their loan canceled as a result of the IDR account adjustment, and borrowers who have already had their loan canceled as a result of PSLF. So it's happening. And then after the decision came down in Biden v. Nebraska, President Biden announced that there was going to be a debt relief rulemaking, right? A rulemaking is like when the Department of Education gather interested parties to kind of propose rules and come up with rules to kind of about existing federal student loan program, basically, right? So there's a rulemaking going on right now to kind of provide relief to borrowers, who are impacted, disproportionately or, harshly by student debt. Now, the confines of that, what it's going to look like is still on a negotiation, but
Yeah.
it's potential, you know, for us to have rules out of that rulemaking that could provide additional relief to people. It sounds like a lot of information that I'm throwing out there. I hope some sticks. I hope it fits your situation. But if something comes up or if you have additional question, we have resources, the National Consumer Law Center. This
Yeah.
is what we do. We are like following, the process. We are looking out for the interest of borrowers. So you can go to studentloanborrowerassistance.org, studentloanborrowerassistance.org. There's no S in borrower, studentloanborrowerassistance.org.
Yeah.
Can go there. There's a knowledge center, but also is a resource center. And now also if you have stories about student loan that you want to share, please share your stories with us because we use the stories that we hear from borrower, like the excellent safe
To
story you
advocate.
share with me, right? Because we needed that for as a tool for our advocacy to kind of let the folks in the IT department, in the administration know, like, hey, what you're doing is working.
Yeah.
Or and say, hey, what you're doing is not working, and this is why. So
Yeah.
I think it's not the best. I mean, I won't say, I mean, we're a lot better than we were before.
Yes.
Okay. And that's always good.
And so with that said, what is one thing that you think everyone should know, recognize, or employ regarding student loan forgiveness? I know you've given us 50 million nuggets, but if you had to just pick the one that's like, I guess, most applicable to the greatest amount of people, what would it be?
Huh. That's I would think for right now, in this space, right, is check your repayment plan. If you're not enrolled, you're doing yourself a disfavor unless you have a bunch of money that you're able to pay under the standard plan, which is a lot of money that you have to
Yeah.
cough up. Get into an income driven repayment plan that's gonna make it reduce the burden on you, but also help you meet your obligations. And then
Yeah.
like stay in the news. A lot of things are happening. And keep advocating for it. I mean, debt relief did not happen, but that shouldn't stop the advocacy,
Yeah.
because if you stop sharing your story, if you stop making noise, folks are gonna think everything is okay when it's not, right? So keep talking about student debt. We're making progress, the administration is making progress, but the debt is still here, all right?
Yeah.
Not gonna fix everything. So you have to, be proactive, keep talking about it, keep sharing your stories, and if things goes by, let her know. And I know it's more than one, but IDR and then fresh start is your end default. Do it. Fresh start. Do it. Do it. Do it.
Yes.
Now. And if you have questions, concerns, or something's not working, please reach out. And Adriana, you have my email, like send it
Yep.
out. Also the website, please. There's information out there and there are things
Yes.
happening. So yeah.
The information shared here and the resources that you provided will be linked in our post as well as in the description section. So it will most certainly leave here. It's going to positively impact so many folks in this space. And like, what is it? The compounding effect where, hey, this is shared with the next person and the next person, and they're able to get the information that Alpha provided here is going to be so super important, whether they're the borrowers themselves or know someone who is. So with that, any last words of wisdoms that you like to share?
Last words of wisdom is like you don't want to be forgotten, right? We don't want people to forget this, right? And we
Yeah.
know that right now student loan topic is hot. That it's in the news because like of all the things that's been happening. But we want this to continue because until we can actually resolve these challenges and address this debt, you know, the American dream is going to be unreachable, for more and more people. This is not
Yeah.
that most people went in saying, yep, and I like to have $300,000 student loan debt. It
I'm
was never
gonna
the case. Yeah.
Alpha, you have been quoted as saying
Uh-huh.
we didn't land on student loan debt. Student
Yeah.
loan debt landed on us.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we didn't land on it, right? Like it just came. You had no choice. That's why I'm like, hey, like what choice did I had? Like, I mean, that's more for most borrowers, especially Black borrowers. Like, if you want to get an education, you want to get a degree, this is it, and you have it, and you did it thinking, hey, I'm going to be somebody. And most of the time, yes, you have become that person, but I know it's still challenging, even if you are, you have a doctorate or a master's or you have a job, because as Black folks, when we make it, it's not just us. We gotta help everybody down the line.
Mhm.
You gotta spread the wealth, right? And that also creates challenges, when it comes to like meeting some financial
Mhm.
obligations. But this is really an opportunity, and we have to keep making noise. We have to keep the advocacy going so that this can be addressed. There are many issues that are affecting, our community that is, definitely more, at a higher scale, right?
Yeah,
But this is one of many. And I think the time is right for us to keep pushing, and let's keep pushing and see how things goes in the next couple of years. But yeah, so don't forget about your student loan debt. I know you won't.
fingers crossed. All
I'm
right.
not gonna forget, and don't forget. All right.
Don't forget, keep making noise. Check out the National Consumer Law Center for resources and the other website, which is,
Studentloanborrowerassistant.org. There's a lot to,
thank you.
but read there, share your stories or any concerns or questions you have.
Yes. So once again, thank you, Alpha, for your time. This has been so informative. It chock-a-block of information. I'm overwhelmed and appreciative
I just have to
all
squeeze
at the
it
same
in
time.
there because, like, I want people to hear me talk, right? It's like, let me tell you about student loan. It's like, there's a
Yes.
lot of chunk of information that's in there. If you don't understand something or if you miss something, check out the website. Oh, email me. I'll get back to you.
Yes. Please return later this evening for another conversation that highlights a different aspect of the student loan landscape with the amazing Bree Franklin of the Prosperity Project. Once again, Alpha, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.